Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Now, joining us is Dr. CHIMA AMADI, a senior policy consultant at the Center for Transparency Advocacy, one of the accredited civil society election observers. He will be speaking to us on the role of civil society at the upcoming general elections. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
In addition to your resume, you've also been a youth leader in many capacities. How much of a task is it to get our youth to participate physically and actively in elections?
I think the tide is turning. They recently released voters register. Tells us that for the first time in the history of our country, 51% of our voting population
are the youth.
Are the youths between the ages of 18 to 35. I mean, I think politicians should step up because it clearly tells you that the era of organizing rallies and dancing in public places, I think that era is over. And why do I say this? You need to compare this data with other data. If 51% of our voting population is made up of people within the ages of 18 to 35, and the NCC says that Nigeria has a teledensity of about 176 million, and internet population about 111 million, according to December 2018 figures. And many of those who are accessing this internet in Nigeria, you have a social media presence, talking about WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. In Nigeria, it's inching close to about 70 million. Many of these people, youths, that are constantly engaging with the process, that get news at the speed of light. Then these youths, and many of them, of course, are informed. That tells you that you need to begin to craft messages that resonates with them and meets them at the point where they engage, not at rallies. Rallies are good but at the point where they engage. So I'm particularly impressed with what is happening. But then the big question is, will this demographic rise up to the challenge and express their power? Can this demographic say this is the time for us to get what we want? Recently, we talked about the Not Too Young to Run bill. Now, which is now an act and a law. Now, if this demographic decide to say we want to grab power, hiding under the Not Too Young to Run regime, they can actually determine who the next president or the next governor or the next legislators are. But again, that boils down to, are they ready to take their PVCs and do the needful, or is the PVC or is the PVC just a form of identification?
As much as you say that, they're very active on social media, that is without a doubt a fact, but will they physically go and vote on election day? That's the important question.
Is it a good thing about our election processes now? The election in Nigeria is changing for the better, incrementally since 1999. Of course, let's just say since 2011, INEC has gotten better and better. And now we have data. In 2015, following the elections, we now have robust data. So I know the number of artisans that voted. I know the number of farmers that voted. I know the number of women. I have this information. The statistics is released. And I'm sure it's going to happen this time around too. So with this, you can draft messaging, you know the campaign issues and all that. And we are seeing situations where the youth are getting more involved. You see celebrities being engaged in messaging by the INEC, and it's resonating. Why is that resonating? The influx of, we had about over 15 million new voters for the register. These are mainly youths, and they are talking. They are the ones most affected by the unemployment in the country. Because if you also look at the MBS figures, you're looking at the sizable number of the 20 million people that are not employed coming within this demographic. They are the ones who also are talking about the challenges of the society and all that. So I think that after the elections, and when we begin to crunch the numbers, we might see a movement away from the youth just sitting down with his PVC as a means of identification to them.
Yeah, obviously impressed with the participation or the level of participation of the youth, either on the being elected or to be elected or to cast it, or to participate in the election side of the divide. After the not too young to run bill, the number of candidates we've seen that are youth and then the number of people who have registered. But let's talk about INEC. You have also mentioned that INEC has gotten better over the years, but going into the 2019 elections, INEC seems to be struggling with the issue of trust.
Yes, and I would be surprised if that component is not there. Look, you will not blame Nigerians if they don't trust INEC the way we think they should. Here was an organization, an agency in 1999. The military organized elections for us. We didn't have any choice then. Whatever came up, we knew that the basics of what an election should be was not clearly met. But for us, we just wanted the military to go. Let them just go so we can take our affairs in our hands. In 2003, it wasn't anything home to. And then from then, civil society groups started and other groups started agitating for an improvement in the election process. 2007 was a debacle. And a debacle to the extent that the beneficiary of that process, the presidential winner of the PDP, in his opening speech, agreed, alluded to the fact that the process that brought him in was not the best, and instituted, a process of a reform. That reform culminated in of course, the 2011 appointment of Professor Jega. If you recall, the president then, Goodluck Jonathan, talked about appointing a credible Nigeria because he knew that the credibility of the umpire, was important towards engendering trust. Now, 2015, we said, was a major departure from what we used to see. But don't forget that process started in 2011 with the introduction of certain reforms. We talked about moving away from the paper kind of voting, what do you call it, the paper cards, to a permanent voter card, to introduction of the smart card reader, introduction of other reforms like I think we're going to go into that the INEC has instituted to ensure that your votes count. Now, it paid off. For the first time in the history of Nigeria, we were able to unseat a sitting government. You know the issue of, you have power of incumbency. The myth of power of incumbency was dismantled in 2015. Now we're going to 2019, to this year, and we're seeing signs that things are improving. What are the signs?
Political parties don't agree with that. Some of them don't agree with that.
Look, if political parties begin to agree with science and the things we see, then something is wrong. Look, in contest, you have the umpire, the people, and the parties. Nobody loses an election, especially in our climate, in the developing world, where politics is everything. Politics is the economy, politics is culture, politics is everything. Nobody loses an economy and claps for the umpire. But we've seen that happen, though, in this INEC. Don't forget that in the Ondo elections, the gubernatorial elections in Ondo State, history was made. Nobody went to the tribunals. They considered defeat because the process was clear, everybody saw it, it was glaring to everybody. There was no need to go to the tribunals. In Anambra State again, a state that from 1999 to 2003 has never left the courts. In fact, Anambra State is notorious for having the highest number of court cases relating to elections in Nigeria. But hey, in last year, I think the elections, they had their governorship elections. What happened? Nobody went to court. Because you have a process instituted by the INEC that was clear, that carried everybody along, that showed an attempt by the umpire to do what is right. And when they happened, everybody agreed that the right thing was, and that the result was a fair expression of the aims and aspirations.
But there are also examples of Osun and Ekiti.
Talking about examples of these states, your group monitored the Osun and Ekiti state elections last year. With that experience now, will there be a reason to do things differently for you?
Let us situate what's happened, because there's this thing about, Ekiti and Osun State. Let us really talk about what happened in Ekiti and Osun State.
Maybe we should.
And we also need to understand that INEC is just one component in the election value chain. I've mentioned the people themselves, the voting public, the INEC, the umpire, the politicians, I've talked about. And then a critical component, the security. Let's not forget that. And then you have all the observers. So I have a whole range of value chain. And then in all this value chain, if you have problem in one, then you have problem elsewhere. So in a kidney state, before then you had started seeing what I call a misbehavior by security agents. You had the infamous attack, quote unquote, on a sitting governor. Tear gassing. I mean, I was tear gassed in Ekiti. They play, and now people run hater. It created a tense environment. Now, elections are not wars. We should remember that. I mean, I voted outside Nigeria. I voted in London. You know, in England, I voted, and there was no war. There was not even the normal issue of people go their normal businesses.
By post.
In Ghana here, we observed elections in Ghana. There was nothing like curfew. People went their normal businesses and went back to work. But here you had a situation where an atmosphere of war was placed in the environment. But then, surprisingly, on the day of the election, the security operatives acted professionally, and it was contained in our reports. Now, professionally, we need to put it in context too. They allowed the politicians to have their way. So you had issues of vote buying, but the security operatives that were supposed to arrest those perpetrating these acts stood aside and allowed people. So it was a kind of bazaar, a kind of free for all, highest bidder. So, and then the candidate of the People's Democratic Party was outbidded, in our estimation. But then you go to Osun State. But it was also a reflection of what the people want. The people sold their votes. And so you will be told that the person who paid more won the elections. In Osun State, and you had two elections, the first Osun State and the second Osun State. Look, by 8 o'clock, the umpire had achieved 99.9% deployment in every polling.
8 a.m.
8 a.m. in every polling unit. And for us as observers, we have what we call a checklist of what you want to expect. Once you use that checklist, then it's done. The umpire has met his own his processes. Yeah. So by 8 a.m., 99.9% deployment in every. It has never happened before in the history of Nigeria that by 8:05, 100% deployment. So what that means is that by 8:05, every election officer, presiding officer, they were all on ground. Not like before, where Nigerians will wait for them to come. This time, they were waiting for Nigerians to come and vote. It was achieved. People used to talk about the smart card readers and all that. Now, of course, we had issues from, if you recall, in 2015, about 35% or so, I'm not sure, voted without smart card because it could, now,
it was ineffective.
In Anambra State, less than 1% of the smart people that voted had faults with the smart card reader. Of this 1%, 98.8% was resolved on the spot. In Ekiti State, less than 0.01% had faults, and 100% of these were resolved. In Osun State 1, the first elections, you had less than 0.001% of the force of card reader. So the card reader worked almost to perfection. Yeah. So on that, you click, you tick for the election officer. Now, for where places you had these malfunctions, there was what you call the RATA, the Registration Area Technical Crew, that was available to resolve these issues. But then, that was where the problem started. The political actors decided not to play by the rules. They went on a free-for-all vote buying. The security operative decided not to play by the rules, allowed thugs to unleash mayhem in certain parts of Osun State. So that was why you had the inconclusive nature, because certain places had been affected by violence, thereby not allowing elections to take place and all that. And then you had to cancel them. Okay. And by the time you tabulated the results, the margin of victory between was so small that the election office, the umpire, could not declare because of the constitutional issues, and it was declared.
Well, you've been engaging with INEC in the build-up to these elections, as well as other political actors and political parties. What is the sense you get going into this election? Do you think that there will be a difference? Are we heading to a free, fair, credible elections?
Look, the INEC just released its guidelines. Now, the guidelines we've seen is a function of the various elections that conducted over the years, during the interregnum, put all these things together, bring together to say, look, this document forms a robust guidelines that will help ensure that we have a free and fair elections. There were inputs. The political parties raised issues. About 10 demands were made. The INEC looked at it. The civil society organizations raised issues. When the final guideline was received last Monday, the INEC had taken these opinions into consideration and had, for the political party, it has dropped about 8 of the things and accepted about 8 of their demands, only 2.
What are those 2? And
those 2 is the issue of the continuous accreditation and voting. Now, what is the spirit behind this? The spirit here is, before now in Nigeria, voting used to be a day-long affair. You come, you register, you accredit, then you go home. Back. Then after some time, you come back. Now, in 2015, 2 million Nigerians were disenfranchised. What happened was they had the accreditation, went back. Some of them could not come back. Some of them, for whatever reasons, did not vote. Now, imagine if the margin of victory between the president and Goodluck Jonathan was 2.5 million. 2 million could have made a lot of difference. They didn't come back. And then observers, international communities, the EU, the AU, they all came and said, Nigeria is the only country that still maintains an accreditation, a stack accreditation and voting, separate voting.
Separately.
The only country. It doesn't make sense. And we made that, and the INEC said, okay. Now, between 2015 to now, the INEC has conducted 194 elections with the continuous voting and accreditation and voting system. It has worked perfectly. This time by 2 o'clock, polls end, people go home. You don't have the elections spilling into late into the night. In fact, the first time it was tried was in Bayelsa State. People forget is that it was because the continuous accreditation and voting system was used in Bayelsa. That was why the PDP won the election. If you recall, that election had to go for a rerun. The margin between the PDP and the APC was just 30,000. Now, the APC could have clinched it with the old system because where the major post was coming was for Southern Nigeria.
Very quickly, because of want of time, that was one issue. What was the second issue quickly? And if the political parties insist that this cannot happen, what then is the fate of the elections?
Look, the political parties cannot insist because you have the powers to regulate the elections. It's still doing so within the INEC. It has the powers to do that. And we are saying that for us as observers, we're saying that if this has worked 194 times, then it is okay. Secondly, the issue of recruitment is also another issue. The recruitment of ad hoc staff. And political parties are saying, let us have a clear guide. And the guideline says that only what you call youth corpers will be used for the election. But where you don't have youth corpers, for example, a place like Lagos or Kano, where you'll be needing about 55,000 ad hoc staff, where are you going to get the youth corpers? Then you use staff from federal institutions and all that.
Well, taking you up on 2.5 million Nigerians not voting, being disenfranchised because they got accredited and then didn't go back there and didn't go back to voting. I don't think that was the point. It was a case of them deciding not to go back, so they were not really disenfranchised. That's where we're going to have to leave it here now. Dr. CHIMA AMADI, thank you for being here this morning.